Hi all, it's that time of week you all look forward to again. It's Thursday. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Enjoy the show. Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Apologies for the slight delay. I had a little bit of catching up to do. The intel is fairly explosive and voluminous. It was not quite the special day we would hope for, but it's not too far away. And it's going to be interesting. So who bit the dust? Well, you'll find out later. What is likely to bit the dust in today's show is the questions section. I have too much to cover, including a piece I wanted to write a long time ago that I felt needed to be covered. It will elicit reactions. I will explain that beforehand, so that will be interesting. But I hope it's listened to, pondered on before reactions are made. So that's all coming up in tonight's show. If we don't get to questions, I'll see how far I get time-wise with the news. We'll probably do a Q&A show and likely a further update, because you have no idea the levels of things that are going on currently. And maybe tomorrow night or Saturday night at the latest, depending on how things unfold. Everything is on edge now. Right, let's get into the links for the show. And the links for the live show, which is generally 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a bit later tonight, is Spreaker.com/user/8955881. You can also listen live via the website we have, which includes all the must-listen to shows. That gives you the full gist of what THI is all about and what we've been involved in. And the archive of all the shows. And we're now introducing some of the transcripts of the special portions of different shows. We put one on this week, a new edition this week, the 32 or 33 events. So that's on thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have the Facebook Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook alternative at MeWe.com, also called Truth, Honour and Integrity. And please send an email for those who can't find it. And this email is also for comments and questions. Apologies if you put questions in today. I haven't had a chance to go through those emails today. And the email for the show is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. So the person who complained about the length of the email this week, it wasn't my doing. But it is what it is. We have the foundation, the People's Club Foundation, of what's coming up, and that's all the details of that are on thepeoplesclub.org. For those of you who wish to contribute to me, please go to patreon.com/TommyW/memberships. Now on there are the transcripts, which is generally a week or two later, of all the shows. I think it goes back as far as April last year. I've still got to put a few more months of this year on yet, and maybe I'll get round to doing them this week. But it's all the details of the intel and also the op-ed pieces, not the Q&A or the news and views. So it's more the meat of the show, and they're on Patreon. Right, it's been a hectic day, strange day, almost a special day. But we'll wait. It's way down. Let's start with this news item. Minnesota judge last week sentenced a former FBI agent to 4 years behind bars after the man reportedly confessed to giving classified defense documents to a reporter. Yes, I know what you're thinking. U.S. District Judge Wilhelmina Wright told Terry James Albury, who's 39 years of age, who pleaded guilty earlier this year, that he knowingly committed the crime despite its illegality. Now, the judge said you did so willingly, you knew what you did was a criminal act, and you knew you were putting the nation's security at risk. And a 4-year prison term matches the seriousness of the crime and should serve as a deterrent to others. Really? Now, prosecutors labelled Albury's actions as a betrayal of the public's trust when he stole more than 70 documents, dozens of which were considered classified, and a secret document pertaining to how the Bureau assesses confidential informants was reportedly among the records he provided to an online news organisation. Oh my. And Mr. Sessions chimes in and said crimes like this one committed by the defendant in this case will not be tolerated, and they will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and also punished, according to Mr. Jeff Sessions. Question remains, is there's others that have been doing this and far more serious consequences, and yet they still walk the streets. The question is, at this point, why? Where are we next? Hillary Clinton, a member of the New York Times editorial board, has a message for the broadly unpopular Hillary Clinton this week as the crucial midterm elections loom. I'll be glad when that day is finished. Trust me, we all will. And he stated that she should stay off the campaign trail or risk firing up the GOP base. Times board member Michelle Cottle penned a piece headlined, "Hillary Clinton Masterclass in Distraction." Yes, indeed. That essentially tells the failed 2016 one-horse race presidential candidate to back off and allow Democrats to focus on the midterms. Cottle also wrote that someone needs to perform an intervention before Clinton further complicates life for her fellow Democrats, because she has been on a tear in recent weeks and doing more harm than good. She's never done good, trust me. And the esteemed DePauw University professor and media critic Jeffrey McCall told Fox News that it was probably hard for the Times to run this column, given its broad support for Hillary in the past. Times are changing, very subtly. Jordan, the country Jordan, not the basketball player. I think he's a basketball player anyway. I don't follow American sports too much. Says it plans to end a lease of 2 areas of land to Israel that was agreed in annexes in the 1994 peace treaty between the two countries. This is going to get interesting. The areas are Naharium in the north and Tisafar in the south, known as Bakara and Gamma in Arabic, and the lease governing them was for 25 years and has been due for renewal. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Nutty Asshole said that Israel would negotiate over extending the current agreement, but earlier King Abdullah of Jordan issued a statement saying it wanted to end the lease, which has seen the 2 areas covering a total of 1,000 acres being cultivated by Israeli farmers. Now, the areas had always been a top priority for Jordan, and the decision was based on our keenness to take whatever is necessary for Jordan and the Jordanians. That's going to get interesting. Not only should Jordan take back their land, but the Israelis should be pushed back to the 1967 land area also. West Bank, Gaza. Now, following, we did a piece about transgenderism and the way gender is being used and abused for political ideology. I have another piece later on that. And it's all part of a program. But we mentioned, or I made my own opinion quite clear, that babies born with appendages are men and not women. It's that simple. No one's saying transgender people don't have rights. They do have rights the same as everybody else. But when it becomes politically driven and program related driven, which is another one of the let's split the families up, then it becomes an issue. But I'm pleased to say that the Trump administration this week is now considering narrowly defining gender as biological, immutable condition determined by genitalia at birth. Now, this is quite a dramatic move by the government in an effort to roll back recognition and protections of transgender people under federal civil rights law. Now, a series of decisions by the Obama administration loosened the legal concept of gender in federal programs, including in education and also healthcare, recognizing gender largely as an individual's choice and not determined by the sex assigned at birth. Now, the policy prompts fights over bathrooms, dormitories, single-sex programs and other arenas where gender was once seen as a simple concept. Obviously, conservatives, especially evangelical Christians, were incensed, and the department argued in its memo that key government agencies needed to adopt an explicit and uniform definition of gender as determined on a biological basis that is clear, grounded in science, objective, and administratable. Now, the agency's proposed definition would define sex as either male or female, unchangeable, and determined by the genitals that a person is born with, according to a draft reviewed this week. And any dispute about one's sex would have to be clarified using genetic testing. That's nothing against the transgender people, no, all the liberals and all the other people who are too stupid to realise it's a programme. It's got out of hand, and it's costing the government and ultimately us a terrific amount of finances being wasted on these stupid programmes that are not there to benefit anyone bar the system. They're not interested in transgendered people, they're not interested in gay people, they're not interested in black people, they're not interested in white people for that matter. Feminism movements, civil rights movements, these people, the old system, are not interested in any of us. They just use certain so-called minorities to push their agenda. Now, the US Secretary Stephen Mnuchin met with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on Monday, and illustrating how the White House is retaining close ties with the embattled Middle Eastern leader despite a growing international outcry. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry posted a photo of the meeting on Twitter, and in a caption the Saudi government wrote that bin Salman in the meeting stresses the importance of the Saudi-US strategic partnership. where it holds an important role in the future in line with the Kingdom's vision, #Vision 2030. Interesting numbers. If it changed vision to agenda, don't like that for one minute. Mnuchin last week announced that he's withdrawing from a conference in Saudi Arabia this week amid the international backlash following the killing of Washington Post contributing columnist Jamal Khashoggi. I think I got that right. Still, Treasury was reluctant to comment on the meeting, which had not been previewed in advance. We'll have more on that later. Bruce Riedel, a former senior CIA official who is now head of the intelligence project at the Brookings Institute, said the meeting between the Crown Prince and Mnuchin is a way for Saudi officials to send a statement to the US that they cannot be ignored and won't be cowed by any investigation into Khashoggi's death. The Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. currently says that 5 of its most valuable artifacts are all thought to be part of the historic Dead Sea Scrolls, are all fake and will not be displayed anymore. German-based scholars tested the fragments and found that 5 show characteristics inconsistent with ancient origin and therefore will no longer be displayed at the museum. They had hoped that the testing would render different results, and this was an opportunity to educate the public on the importance of verifying the authenticity of so-called rare biblical artifacts. Now, the elaborate testing process undertaken was done in their commitment to transparency, according to Jeffrey Kaloa, the chief officer for the Museum of the Bible. And as an educational institution entrusted with cultural heritage, the museum upholds and adheres to all museum and ethical guidelines on collection care, research and display. Now, some scholars have questioned the fragments in the collection even before the museum opened with a rather lavish ceremony last November. Now, others believe they are all fakes. That's the Dead Sea Scrolls. Another thing that was mentioned, same figure, in our show not so long back. President Trump this week, speaking to reporters at the White House as he left on a campaign trip to Texas, said on Monday that his administration plans to produce a resolution within 2 weeks calling for a 10% tax cut for middle-income people. Now, this is on top of the original tax cuts. And he said, we're putting in a resolution sometime in the next week or week and a half to 2 weeks, and we're given a middle-income tax reduction of about 10%. And he says we're going to do it now before the election for the middle-income people. Now, Trump said on Saturday his administration was studying a tax cut to be rolled out sometime around the beginning of November, just before the November 6th congressional elections, even though lawmakers are out of town campaigning and Congress is not currently in session. Interesting figure. Oh my. Our members are going to love this. They're going to know why this is happening. Very familiar for banks. After nearly 3 years of rate increases from the Federal Reserve, customers are pulling billions of dollars out of accounts that don't earn interest and putting their money into higher yielding alternatives. This will crimp banks' abilities to grow profits going forward, and the four largest US banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup, reported a combined 5% drop in US deposits that earned no interest in the third quarter compared to a year ago. Customers withdrew more than $30 billion from the US bank accounts that don't earn interest over the year that ended in June 30th. Now, this is the first such annual decline in more than a decade, according to the Federal Deposit Insurance Company, FDIC, and these deposits largely consist of business and consumer checking accounts and are considered particularly valuable because banks can use these no-cost deposits to make loans using our money and making us pay the loans back. As short-term interest rates rise, they become even more lucrative. So there's one way you can hurt the bank. Take it out. That's how, then they have nothing to loan. Then they don't earn any money. Then these four rogue corporations go bankrupt. They're not far off anyway. Richard Branson stepping down as chairman of Virgin Hyperloop One, saying the company needs more hands-on leader. I think you've been hands-on for on far too many other things, Mr. Branson. Yes, we know about your little island and NXIVM. Now, the news was reported by Reuters on Monday. It comes after Branson this month cut some business ties with Saudi Arabia, and as did several other US companies following the disappearance and killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The billionaire wrote about his response in a blog on October the 11th, and Saudi Arabia last week terminated the plan with the Virgin Hyperloop One, according to Mr. Branson, and after Branson put an end to investment talks there. All faction fighting. At our stage of development, he felt the company needs a more hands-on chairman, according to the Virgin spokeswoman in a statement. Perhaps the heat's been turned on Mr. Branson and his Packer Island, which is owned by him, that has NXIVM parties on and is located right next to Epstein Island. Oops. President Trump escalated his attacks on the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell this week, saying the head of the nation's central bank threatens US economic growth, and they appeared to enjoy raising interest rates. Absolutely. They're doing it deliberately, and this is a power struggle. Pure and simple. Now, in an interview Tuesday with the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Trump acknowledged the independence of the Fed has long enjoyed in setting economic policy, whilst also making clear he was intentionally sending a direct message to Mr. Powell that he wanted interest rates lowered. Every time we do something great, Mr. Powell raises the interest rates. Yeah, it's a counter move. Mr. Trump says he is now aware of this issue. He's fully brought up to speed. Many other presidents before him were not. They didn't understand it. Mr. Trump said, adding that Mr. Powell almost looks like he's happy raising interest rates, and the president declined to elaborate, and a spokesman for the Fed declined to comment. Go figure. Trump said it was too early to say, but maybe he regrets nominating Mr. Powell. I would like to suggest he removes him and the whole building, in my opinion. We've had enough of the raping and pillaging of America, operating under the guise of the United States, which we're not. We're nothing to do with the United States. The United States is a European-based operation. Always was. Go check out Congress of Vienna. 1700s, 1800s, United States was the states of Europe and America. Political campaigners in Brazil have been exposed this week. They've used software that scrapes Facebook for citizens' phone numbers and then automatically sends them to WhatsApp messages and adds them to WhatsApp groups. Now, almost 3 weeks ago, 147 million voters in the country went to the polls for legislative elections and the first round of the presidential elections. This coming Sunday, they will decide between the far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro and the left-wing Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad in the second round of the presidential election. Now, an investigation has discovered that efforts to support various parties and candidates covering state, federal and Senate votes have used a bulk message technique. Some of the devices involved in the data scraping can send up to 300,000 messages at any given time. Now, these messages are then sold via the internet, and some sellers claim their use is hard to trace. Now, the method is not just limited to politics. Marketeers have also used it to promote cosmetics and food, among other products, to the Brazilians. I'm going to repeat that first part again because it's important. You know, we did the piece last week, what app really means and what it stands for, the etymology of it. But this is what they're doing. So they get the software that scrapes Facebook. In other words, it goes through everyone's Facebook looking for your phone numbers and then sends them to WhatsApp messages and then adds them to WhatsApp groups, which then is used. These apps that you've got on your phone are badly dangerous. Badly dangerous. They have access to everything because you sign up for them. It's like I told you about the Weather Channel. Living in Florida, sometimes it's useful to get alerts on tornadoes or storms coming in or whatever, until I seen what that app entailed. All your contacts, all your texts, all your emails and all your pictures you have to hand over just to find out what the weather's like. You're giving them consent is what you're doing. Is it really that important? Well, it wasn't to me. I just deleted it. I'm not signing up for that. What does the Weather Channel want with my pictures, contacts, emails and texts? This is what's going on. Now we're going to go into a music break after this piece. And it is alarming. But it will preface a later piece about the shenanigans of the CIA. Because I believe the two are linked. Perhaps I should follow it up before. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Right, the news item first. 2 Florida schoolgirls have been arrested today and accused of plotting to kill classmates in a satanic rite. Police say the girls, 11 and 12 years of age, oh my, told officers that they were Satan worshippers and planned to kill at least 15 students at Bartow Middle School. On Tuesday, they were searched by police who found weapons, including a butcher's knife, a pizza cutter and scissors, and they told investigators they planned to drink the blood of their victims and possibly eat their flesh. Now, the search took place after a student informed a teacher about a possible attack in the school building, and the two girls who were waiting in the toilet for younger students that they could overpower to be their victims. In a statement, Bartow Police Chief Joe Hall said the search of the girls' mobile phones revealed text messages plotting the attack, and officers had also found a handwritten note saying, "Go to the bathroom to kill." Two girls, aged 11, talking about Satan worshipping, eating the victims and drinking their blood. I wonder where that came from. Do they even know what they're saying or what they're doing? And here's, when I locate it, here's why, or some of the possibility of why. Tactics used by the CIA to create candidates for their programs. Now, some of this was taken out of a book, and it's got bits of my own interaction with, plus the people I've spoken to who have been involved in these and subjected to these programs and come out and survived. But the CIA go to local hospitals, which will become a key figure, or immigration centres to find viable candidates for their programs. They often select people who have no close family or friends, and subjects will be collected and taken to a location and tested there for their vulnerability, whether they will be accessible enough to go into the program. In other words, are they subject to mind control? Not all people can. If the person passes that test, they are then moved on to level 2, where they undergo hypnosis, and the instructions given via hypnotic commands or suggestion. This goes directly into the personality of the person, and then they are given small tests to check if it worked. If they carry out the small tests well, they are then recalled via hypnotic suggestion to the same location. The subject will have no memory of why they are attending this location. None whatsoever. If they haven't received at this time a trigger word or a trigger sound or a trigger code, the handler of the subject administers it, and this is a more powerful form of hypnosis which is similar to neuro-linguistics programming. The subject is then told where and when to report, and again will have no recollection of it. The next step is level 3, where the subject undergoes an overwrite of their own personality, like a new identity in essence. And this is the equivalent of multiple personality disorder. Now, in my opinion, multiple personality disorder is not a mental health issue, but a possession or a walk-in issue. And once the entities are removed, that person will recover. But the overwrite is not permanent in the case of this type of program that Langley runs, but is set for a specific length of time. Now, this is so they can carry out orders and return to being themselves, completely oblivious to what went on previously, oblivious to the tasks that they have carried out. Once level 3 is accomplished, that person is ready for all types of covert missions, including assassinations, false flags, etc. At this level, the subject is eliminated from fear and nervousness, and they are programmed in a way that the handler is the only one you can trust. This is reminiscent of what goes on with the Illuminati children from 0 to 6, where they can get passed off to other handlers at the Waldorf Steiner schools. And the subject is also told that he or she are above all laws of the land. Now, if the person's IQ is high enough, they will then study for their abilities according to the needs of the tasks they wish to carry out. Once this is completed, they are then taken to various places in America and Canada for the final programming. These centres are known as the farm. And one is a main hospital in Dallas, Texas. And I knew of another place in West Virginia. And as regards Canada, I can guarantee one of those places, if not more of them, is in Vancouver, British Columbia, given the vast amounts of shenanigans with people up there. But these places are all over America and Canada. Level 4 training is where the person can no longer differentiate between right and wrong. They are told that they are superhuman and all laws are written for all the other people. All smacks of super soldier to me, but that is a different program. These are for the so-called ordinary people amongst us, and they have no idea of any of this taking place. It's a bit like the Monarch girls that we recently mentioned in recent shows. Very pretty females used for operational purposes, and they have no idea what's going on. At level 4, they become a fully trained sleeper assassin with no shame, guilt or any remorse, just a cold-hearted killer, but also has the ability, because it's programmed into them, to be a suicide mission operative as well. This is to cover if the person starts remembering anything. They'll have a trigger in the brain where the subject will suicide themselves. Other more diverse programs can be added to the subjects at level 4 as well, as any command is accepted at this level. As level 4 is complete, the subject will have no memory of their former life and equipped with new identities, personalities and thinking processes, and relocated to a new town or city to integrate and await the instructions for the trigger. That is how the clowns in Langley operate, the paperclip crew. And this is why you have what seems beyond normal behaviour of 11 and 12-year-old girls talking about drinking blood and chewing people's flesh. It smacks of a program within the school or something related to their family circle. It has to be stopped. Alright, we're going to have a musical break and we'll be back with the intel. Standing on the edge of a revolution, and that is exactly what's going on very quietly behind the scenes. I know you'd all like it out in the open, but to be quite frank with people, you wouldn't like to hear half of the stuff what really goes on behind the scenes. It would sicken you, alarm you, and exasperate you on equal measure. Because the what's happening now is a widening of the gap between what is real news and what is fake and portal people news. And it's never anywhere near our reality. Now, I've covered Mr. Khashoggi last week, and also in the news again. And we're going to be mentioning him again, because you're going to get the real truth. Not what the portal people tell you, or how they spin it, but the real truth. So the Saudi Arabia story and the killing of the journalist Mr. Khashoggi is in the background of what happened somewhere else. And some people within the US military, with full knowledge of the details of what took place with Mr. Khashoggi, then arranged a deal whereby the US, I'll repeat that again, the US, would receive a $2 trillion payout to cover up the murder of Mr. Khashoggi by the Saudi Crown Prince. Mr. Mnuchin, the head of the Treasury, flew out to Saudi Arabia last week to collect the payment. Except Saudi Arabia don't have 2 trillion. None of them do. Their reserves show that they're somewhere around 400 billion. So quite how they were going to pay out rogue elements within the US, 2 trillion is beyond me and everybody else with any sort of common sense. Now, Mr. Mnuchin, who had flown out to Saudi Arabia there, despite being instructed not to go by Mr. Trump, but went anyway, and thought he could bring the funds back to America and use it as a Rothschild-style bailout, like a fake RV payment. This is why all the clowns on the internet still pushing the RV think they were going to get paid out again. Wrong. But Mnuchin and his band of Rothschildians felt they had no options left. After another mass hacking attempt on the quantum system last week, Mnuchin then went to Israel. When he didn't collect any funds from Saudi, he then went on to Israel to collect funds from them. I'll have more on that reason why he went there in a later piece. And they told them they have none either and go to the Saudis, who are the real main funders of the Zionist element in Israel, or go to the Rothschilds, aka the Chinese elders. Now, Mnuchin approached so-called elders and was presented with $40 trillion worth of gold certificates, which he then returned back to America and arranged a meeting with Mr. Trump. Oh boy. At that meeting with Mr. Trump, which Mr. Trump had been prepped for, of what to look out for, what to expect, Mr. Mnuchin started to show Trump each certificate. And Mr. Trump checked it for validity and the origin of the certificates via the terminal. Now, the first certificate stated the holder and the signature was Mana World Holding Trust and Kim Go-Gyun. The second certificate, the same. The third certificate, the same. And once it got to the fourth or more certificate, Mr. Mnuchin asked Mr. Trump to stop. He'd been rumbled. He and they thought Mr. Trump would not check the certificates, but he did, and they all belong to the Mana World Holding Trust. All $40 trillion of them. Oops. Second item. Recently I've been mentioning ankle bracelet man. That is Mr. Mnuchin. head of the Treasury. And yet, despite the ankle bracelet and 2 trackers, and was instructed by Mr. Trump not to leave or go to Saudi Arabia, some elements within the official structure of American government or military still got him out to do business on behalf of not Mr. Trump and America, but on behalf of the United States and the Rothschilds band of goons. Now, following Mnuchin's inability to follow orders and trying to dupe Mr. Trump with the gold certificates that belong to the Manor World Holding Trust, not the Chinese elders, Mr. Mnuchin, who has been responsible for blocking the trust delivering funds into this country, was fired today. Mr. Mnuchin has had his security clearance, his codes, his passwords and ability to operate any financial system was all removed previously to today, so he didn't have access anyway. And Mr. Mnuchin will be on gardening leave until an official announcement of his firing, which may get announced that he resigned. He never, and that is expected by the end of this month. One less high-profile official operating within the government who works and operates for and on behalf of the deep state clowns, gone. Will no longer hold this country to ransom. Mr. Mnuchin is the latest to be known, as he was in a ceremony recently titled as the Chosen One. Yeah. So for the many of you around the world who will listen to this broadcast who think you're the chosen one, and I know many of you have been given that title, you are not the only one. Oh dear. It's about like Mr. Keenan and his M1. There's 74 of them. They just play you like a fiddle, over and over and over again. So I guess being the chosen one doesn't carry as much clout as Mr. Mnuchin thought. So from chosen one, he's now gone back to just being a munchkin. Enjoy your return to Oz, Mr. Munchkin. Yes, Mr. Munchkin back to where he belongs. He won't be the only one that'll get exposed over time. The net around those type of clans is closing in rapidly. I don't think we'll have that much longer to wait before the next one, high profile, goes down. Or maybe there may be a series of them. I suggest at this point there needs to be a plethora removed, either before the election or after, preferably before, because these clowns are interfering with everything. The fake bombs this week, all designed to as a publicity stunt, and a media who are struggling with the fact that the Democrats are getting their asses kicked in the midterm elections, needed a leverage against the people. That leverage won't work. So why did Mr. Mnuchin go to Israel for funding? You're not going to like this. Because all the main military aircraft were removed from the Air Force Base in Florida called Tyndall Tyndall. The F-22s and others were shipped to Israel before the storm in response to Russia's so-called threat within the Middle East. Yet again, a double money-making exercise to get money laundered out of Israel, prolong the war in the Middle East, and so more funding for that, and also claim American government funds to replace the airbase and all the alleged damaged jets. This is what these people have been doing for many, many years, with zero government oversight in the matter, and therein lies the heart of the problem. All these military and government contractors and agencies need government oversight. You have no idea the vast volumes of money that are being siphoned out of this country. No idea whatsoever. But this type of practice needs to be stopped and dealt with as a matter of urgency. If it requires another executive order, I hope Mr. Trump issues it. This country is under attack by elements operating within the so-called US military and also the government. They're financially trying to destroy us by blocking all funding coming in and creating all kinds of havoc amongst the populace to generate money, like wars in the Middle East, like wars in Afghanistan, and fake wars in the China Sea. It's all to generate money, of which is handed over to them far too readily, with no oversight. It has to stop. I hope Mr. Trump and his team now recognises the seriousness of what's really been going on here. We've been warned about it for long enough. I know it's barely believable, and no one should feel guilty or any shame that you were not aware of the levels and depth of what was going on here. The point is, you didn't have the need to know. Again, that has to be stopped. Maybe an executive order bringing the security clearances down from 49 to the president level would eliminate all that nonsense. Something maybe that needs to be considered as a matter of national security, because this country is under national security heavy threat at the moment. So the Florida issue in the storm. The cabal never do anything for one single purpose. There's always three or four. We've just mentioned one, collecting money for rogue elements in the US military to then go and waste again and then recreate the same issue and ask for more money and then recreate it again and ask for more money. But in the region that took the brunt of the alleged storm, and more to do with the direct energy weapons that was used there, the Republican Mr. Scott, who I've got not much time for personally, but his margin in that region, North Florida and the Panhandle, is fairly wide compared to the rest of the state, 51% to 39%. That just happened to be the very same region that was affected by the storm. It is typically a Republican-leaning region. What I can now say about Florida and what's going on there, apart from the non-activity of FEMA, which we pointed out 2 weeks ago, they've still done nothing. That rogue elements are lining up to claim all the damaged land in Florida caused by the so-called Hurricane Michael. Except it wasn't hurricane damage. Major hotel chains and casino people are attempting to move in there and take over all the land for cheap. The 1.3 million people that were displaced, evacuated or forced out currently will not be allowed to go back home. Like I said, currently. Now the same thing that happened after Katrina, there are reports now of those who didn't evacuate out of Florida being shot and killed by rogue elements of the deep state. They were the first on the scene. They always are. Snipers taking people out. I bet they won't report that on the Weather Channel or the Portal People News. This is what's going on. I have warned about it. Next item. I suspect the same thing is happening in the latest storm that went through Mexico. And the other storm that was close by to it, that was not mentioned too much in the news. Now this lesser known one went right along the coastline of southwest Mexico. Hopefully for them to create damage right along the coast around Acapulco. But all the media focus was on Hurricane Willa. Now it's given what I've already said, it's now expected that this was a triple exercise by the cabal. 1, evacuate the whole coast like they did in Florida, which then allows the military to take over the region. Rogue military with the same ending. 2, distract from the so-called named Honduran caravan. And 3, whilst area is evacuated, move new and extra militant terrorists into the region where the hurricane went through. So while all under the cover of military control, so whilst the focus is on the Honduran caravan, and people have now got wind of what we've been saying on this show for a long, long time, of who are in those caravans, they use this distraction tactic and move them in elsewhere. This is the way they work. Now I did warn of this 4 years ago, this plan, and it seems currently to have no ending unless real actions to counter it are forthcoming and quickly. California, Louisiana, Florida, twice. Haiti, Puerto Rico, plus some of the other islands. Plus they were going to do it to Hawaii, remember, a couple of months ago. Maybe the same scenario was applied to South Carolina as well. People in high positions need to act on this, and very, very quickly. Next news item. All government departments, including the military and the Treasury, will be totally broke by the end of this month or by election day. Solutions have been given and options to correct that have been multiple and are still ongoing. But it seems the clowns are still insistent on waiting for the Rothschildians and it doesn't appear that Mr. Trump has too many options to alter that stance as it stands. The change of narrative with Mr. Mnuchin may alter that drastically since I wrote this piece up. Mr. Trump needs radical interjection from American patriots, period. And a support platform within the government framework, or this country will collapse soon. We've tried everything on these deep state goons, block, delay, you name it. Now, the positions in high office known as the deep state are still, as you can see with Mr. Mnuchin, calling the shots in many ways. And due to treasonous elements in so many high positions who are almost treating Mr. Trump like he doesn't exist, the people who are proud to be American need to stand up and support the man. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, it doesn't make a blind bit of difference. They have to support him and his efforts to rescue this country from not only financial ruin, which is less than a week away, but rendered into a third world country. You can't sit there in your desks at the Pentagon, at Langley, at the FBI, at the NSA, at the Department of Homeland Security, and hope it goes away. It won't. It goes away when sufficient people in those buildings show sufficient courage to go and collect Mr. Trump, protect him, and let's roll these deep state clowns over once and for all. There is no negotiating, there's no need for hearings, there's no need for investigations, just remove them. You've been given all the Fulcrum files on all of them that are participating. And the first thing you should do, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, remember, is shut down the fake news and install people who are going to deliver the real news pronto. Next item, latest on the head of the penis race known as becoming the Pindar. It appears that, as it stands now, there is no candidate that is viable. Oops. So, bad luck, Mr. John Von Wright, or is that John Von Wrights? And Wright may be the anglicised version of Wrights, who knows? And his sidekick, Warren Choi, probably another fake Chinese elder. But it seems when they reconvene for the selection of Pindar on November the 1st, they will select a committee to be the Pindar. Oh my. Desperate times require desperate measures, it seems. Either that or the candidates are that low level, even they don't qualify for head penis. So that's what's going on with the Pindar penis. The bombs, or alleged bombs, or fake devices, or whatever you want to call them, have taken up all the coverage on the Portal People News this week, and we have questions here at CHI, as we often do, and we like to ponder on things, given we've got critical thinking brains and not herd mentality. So America has a secret service group whose job it is to go around and protect prominent people, including Mr. Trump, particularly ones who are sent threats or bomb devices as they were this week. What happens next is they are all locked down publicly until the perpetrator of the event is found. It's common procedure. Except this time it seems 6, 7, 8 or 9 people all sent bombs, and Hillary can walk around in the public, minus Secret Service, and appear on national TV, again without Secret Service or major security issue or operation. How does that happen? Now, either the Secret Service are not doing their jobs properly, or somewhere in there they are on the fake and frankly desperate attempt that was perpetrated this week. Now, the 2 pointers which have come up of why this was done is, one, to gain publicity for the Democrats because no one is listening to them anymore, and I hear they are tanking in the mid-term elections, and B, to push the blame onto Trump and his supporters. Double-pronged attack. But I'll tell you what, the more desperate that they become, the more ridiculous and sloppy their false flag attempts get. Suspicious packages indeed. Oh dear. Oh, aye. Perhaps it was a new hard drive reboot for Anne, or a new set of ears for Obama. Who knows? It certainly wasn't bombs. Maybe it was boobs. But the reaction of the Secret Service tells you all that. Next item. This is still the intel. As this show has warned several times of the issues in relation to Mexico and the border, which certain elements operating outside of the government are deliberately exacerbating for political gain. You have to remember it was an Obama policy to let them in droves and then separated the children from their families. The children were separated for a different reason, we all know that. But the so-called families were not the families at all. But all of that was conveniently forgotten by the treasonous portal people, why let facts get in the way when every station reads the same script of lies. Now, the convoy heading towards Mexican and American border is finally being mentioned by some government officials to what we have been alerting via this show for some time now. I think it was Adam Schiff this week who stated they are not starving immigrants fleeing this and that from whatever country like the media declares they are, and everything to do with organised political mudraking, assassination attempts, false flags and mischief. That involves terrorist elements from the Middle East and gangs known as the FARC guerrillas. Now, everyone in that Honduran caravan, and I mean everyone, was paid between $1,500 and $2,500 per person to ride that caravan. $1,500 to $2,500 to ride that caravan. Now, once in the country, they are then met by rogue elements who are behind the payments, who then take them to private camps to train for assassin or false flag roles. This is what's been going on, and like he keeps warning, something needs to happen quickly before this country goes into total meltdown. The government needs an emergency meeting, and quickly, involving all heads of staff, preferably with Kim involved, so we can sort out the financial issues and what's really going on as a matter of national security. You can't just push things to tomorrow, waiting for the failed Rothschilds relief program. It's never coming. All this sitting around waiting for Chinese elders to deliver this package and that package and revalue this and revalue that, and they're all going to release humanitarian programs, etc., etc. The question for those in the higher echelons of government and the military is, why didn't the Chinese elders deliver all the humanitarian packages when they were in control of the trust? Why did they suddenly want to do it when they're not in control? The reality is they're not interested in humanitarian and everything to do with controlling this whole planet and eliminating 90% of you and us. You either wake up to reality or you pay the price. Next, Intel. HSBC and and others, quite a few others, Barclays, the usual, spent all of Saturday trying to hack the quantum system again. And once Kim had had enough of their nonsense, completely fried the HSBC servers. Rumour has it will take a good few months to completely replace all their servers. Well, they can't say we never won them. We have several times. So, to all the other banks who continue to want to try and hack the quantum system, of which you will fail 100% every single time, we'll fry your systems as well. Not just disable it for a couple of hours, fry them totally. Final warning, you won't get another one. 2 senior executives have been suspended from Wells Fargo, as in what the as part of the ongoing regulatory review of the bank's sales practices. Oops. Chief Auditor David Julian and Chief Administrative Officer Hope Hardison have been placed on immediate leave, as well as removed from the firm's operating committee of senior executives. The pair was suspended at the request of the Federal Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. We've mentioned that before. Put 2 and 2 together and you'll know why. I would suggest you watch the other three major banks that I mentioned in the news piece, for theirs to be fired also. Just money for nothing. Hi all and welcome back. Where do we go to next? I saw an advert on Facebook this week, and it appears it has 76,000 members, and the Facebook group was called "The Event Is Coming." Oops. What if we told them that 32 or 33 events, maybe even we were close to 34 events today, have already happened and they missed it? You know, some are just not as awake as they thought, it seems. So while they all sit around waiting for the light switch event, much has already happened. Like I said earlier, that list is now on the Think Different site, so you can go and check it out, or as a reminder. Now, one of the new members posted a video about me and THI last week, which was interesting from an analytical point of view of what we do with this show. And he asked a couple of questions, and I'm going to address it because I think it's important. And the question was, non-believers, what would I do with the non-believers from the video? Well, I have done our show to appeal to all people, not just awake ones. And the show has been done in a stair-step manner to get people to understand on all levels of learning. Now, some like the intel, and some like the pondering op-ed pieces, some like the Q&A section, some don't. Some don't like the news around the world. But I do that to get people to understand what goes on around the world affects us all in some way. You can't just keep ignoring it. We have forgotten to care for all people around the world. Too often only focused on our own small world called town, city, state, country, county. But if we want real change, how can it only apply to the small world that's around us? It can't. The internet brought us all together, not to talk drivel or pass barbs at each other based on your perception that you've been programmed with, that people from here and there are all this and that. I don't like them because they're communists, is the classic example, when very few have read the doctrine of what communism means. Now, the series I'm most proud of doing, the From Russia with Love series, laid it all out for you. How can they distort a whole country and its people? And more is the point, why have we just followed that narrative without doing our own research into it? America and its people around the world are viewed with equal misunderstanding now, seen as fat and lazy, something Mr. Keenan said to me about Americans in a phone call at Christmas 2014. They're all just fat and lazy. Others think we're gun-toting, violent, stupid and warmongers. But is that an accurate description of the American people? Clearly not. But it is a representation of the policy attributed to the country of this time. It's all a program to denigrate America, like they did it with Britain, like they did it with Holland, you name it. Whoever gets put forward as the leading country to do this, that and the other is nothing to do with the country or its people, and everything to do with the policy and the program. You have to understand that. But when the world finally finds out how the American people have been duped, raped, pillaged and poisoned into paying for all the world's sins, then perhaps opinions will change. We have tried to include all people awake or not, but I did make a statement back in November of 2016 that it was time to focus on us and not trying to convince them what was staring them in the face. The truth, all harsh and brutal. Now I think you all are, having had time to review since that statement, understand now why I said it back then. We had to be prepared for the onslaught of what was to come, and I don't think anyone believes now massive change has been underway since around that time of that statement. We tried our best in the alternative media to bring in all. Spoke to our families, friends and work colleagues only to be dismissed as some sort of fool. But the fool was always in the mirror until he or she walked away from the illusion. So I hope that answers your question. You suggested I get frustrated and sometimes angry. I understand the first part. I disagree with the second part. Largely, very rare. But my frustrations are the RV people, blockchain, crypto, OPPT, prosperity packages, NESARA, JASARA and all that BS. And yet people still give it so much energy. We've all seen these before. And yet not one of them worked. And yes, some will say we have not released the mana funds yet. And I do understand that. But that's not through the want of trying. Unlike the others, we have provided the details and the proof that it exists and what will take place with it. The others provide nothing. Just hopium, tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. And yet, Mana World Holding Trust has already delivered funds to a few countries. We would have liked to deliver funds to all of them. But as I said earlier, it's blocked in this country until top people realise we're under a financial assassination programme. Everything's ready to roll on so many things that's going to revitalise, revamp, re-energise, you name it, this country and its people. And every other country and its people. Projects all lined up. But once the final blocks are removed, the Mana World Holding Trust will deliver. We will all benefit from it in so many ways. Where you have a chance to do a job of your choice, not what you're forced to do. New technology will be incrementally released. But I advise to stop giving energy and your money into these harvesting programs. That's essentially all it is. It's a harvesting program on the promise it will bring riches or an end to the cabal. It won't, and all those platforms are actually feeding them. All of them. Latest clown out of the RV world, and it's no coincidence the time scale he put in his big Intel update. But like all the ones that went before him, like Tony, Gilliland, Red Dragon, Tank, Matt and Megan, Dave Schmidt et al., the latest clown is Bruce from Big Intel Call. Ooh. Well, according to him, between 10 and 12 noon Eastern Standard Time today, the Iraqi dinar was being revalued and the SIMs will be rolled and the 800 numbers would be rolled out for the various tiers again. Yes, crying tears, not laid tears. Well, guess what, dumbass? It failed. Now, at which point do these people step away from stupid and back into reality? Dear me. They're basing it on Mnuchin coming back with the gold certificates which belong to the Manor World Holding Trust. Oops. It defies belief. Someone sent me a video to watch the other day, and I don't get much time to, or the inclination sometimes, to watch YouTube videos. This one was a Kerry Cassidy show. Oh dear. I will not be watching it for the simple reason that so much bullshit has come. But it's funny, with all the topics we have covered in our show, she's never approached me, or Randy Morgan's for that matter, to do a show with her. Is it not? Well, actually, it's not funny. It's indicative, actually, of shutting out the real researchers and knowledge in favour of scripted narrative or outright bullshittery. Period. Message to Kerry. I know full well I will never be invited on your show. I'm not sure I would even agree to go on there, being honest. But the day you put David Wilcock and Michael Schratt in the same video show is the day I'll watch again. Because that would be a real interesting double act. And you may have some explaining to do. Winston Shrout. Bye. He's going to follow Sean David Morton, Heather Giraffe, and a few others into jail, which is why he quit the internet last week. And a federal judge heard testimony on Thursday about Winston Shrout, real name Shroth. That's another anglicised name. Unusual, bizarre and implausible delusions, but still found the prominent sovereign citizen competent to face sentencing next month for failing to pay taxes for the past 20 years. Shrout represented himself at a trial and was found guilty of 13 counts of issuing fake financial documents to banks and 6 counts of willful failure to file tax returns. Now, this time his defence attorney Ruben Iniguez argued that Strout was unfit for sentencing, and the defence hired Alexander Milkey, a forensic psychologist, who evaluated Winston for more than 5 hours over 2 days and diagnosed him with Grandos delusion, or Granvas delusional disorder. Now, Mr. Strout described himself in court as an alien walk-in who inhabited a 5-year-old's body and was descended from Jesus and Mary Magdalene. He said he was sent to earth to destroy the Jesuits, according to the court testimony. Oh dear. Now you know why I've been telling people. Ignore these goons on the internet telling not to pay taxes, don't get driver's license, don't do this and don't do that. All of them, in reality, are the truth. Technically, we shouldn't be paying income tax. Technically, we don't need a driver's license unless it's for work. Business. Not going to and from. And yet, we're operating in their system. This is the problem. That's why I always told people, pay your taxes, do this, just play it by the book until the system is fully changed. And it will, over time. But not now. And this is why so many of these people spouting legal ease crap on the internet, and people are getting arrested and jailed in increasing numbers, citing common law in court. Unless you have a background in law, you're going to get hung in the court, citing it. You're just going to get hung. You know, reading a few bits of script here and there and picking up comments in cliched comments is not going to be of much value in court, because they have people in there who will lead you a merry dance right down the stairs into the jail. Some people can carry it off. They have the background knowledge, but it has to be extensive. And it also depends on the person. If it's something that the system wants shut down, you're going down, whether you can cite it or not. Beyond stupid. I'll leave the time. Let's go with this one first. Before the last piece that will elicit some reaction. And it is a statement which, like the one mentioned earlier, may not make sense now, but will become clearer later, as has often been witnessed with this show. But the alternative media, as we now know it, has a very limited lifespan left, and will end soon as we know it, and will become a library archive for those to catch up, in my opinion. So why, you all ask? Well, because it has now reached a point where it's exposed most of the crimes, if not all of the so-called conspiracies, has now been pushed into public view and into fact now. Many of you will have already noticed, as it has increased in frequency of stuff coming out of the alternative media into the mainstream media. I mentioned 2 or 3 earlier. And large portions and also policies written have emanated directly from this show. Now this will increase over the coming weeks and months. But in my opinion, the alternative media will morph into people discussing ways to improve life and society and reporting the improvements in those fields that are being made by we the people. People forming together in various groups of being the change, not requesting it. Now, this show and its members are ahead of time. We are, and we were, the way showers. We have consumed so much of what I term the sin eating of all the ills around the world, and when you thought you had enough, in came another wave like a tsunami of sin. We, which was the few, had no option but to consume it all. Why was that? Because too many of the rest of the people chose to ignore it. They will pay a heavy price and burden for their ignorance of the past. We can't help them with that. And ignorance has now become a choice, due to so much of our work now being presented into the theatre of lies by the portal people. Those people who chose to ignore us in the future, near future, will be in utter turmoil of their own foolishness, laden with the heavy burden of dismissing their friends and loved ones over what is essentially a matter of opinions. The shallowness of their actions against us will play heavily within their own minds and hearts. But we have left a treasure trove of discoveries for them to gorge upon, and also, because of who and what we are, big hearts and minds to support them in their catch-up journey of sin-eating. Except theirs comes with a far heavier burden of being fooled for longer, the shame and guilt of ignoring and dismissing people within their circle, the shame and guilt of knowing if everyone had stood up and supported us, we could have ended the pain and suffering of people globally much sooner. That is the price they will all suffer and pay. We can hold our hands up, and I know myself, I can stand tall and say we tried, and boy did we try to ease their burden at great cost to us all personally. But the alternative media will leave behind a legacy of how the relatively few took on the system and ultimately triumphed against all odds and brought it currently to its knees, ultimately in the near future to its demise. But the alternative media, as we know it or knew it, is nearing its end. That is not a sadness. That should be viewed as an ultimate triumph for us all. Progress is being made in a very steady fashion. As more learn and accept the truth in the higher echelons of society, more will step away from the old system and integrate within the new system and timeline, which will be implemented in our image, not theirs. Now, the final piece tonight will elicit big reactions and overreactions in some cases. But I said on the very first show, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. But I ask, while it's being said, I ask all to listen to it in full, ponder on it, and then decide before jumping to conclusions, as it will trigger some. I get that. But this is why it needs to be addressed. And it's not based on individual cases, but on an overview aspect. The impact of the feminism movement is what this is about. Led by Germaine Greer and others, was supposed to give women equal rights, pay and value, or so we were all led to believe. A bit like ending slavery for blacks, really. They just enslaved us all, and the blacks stayed the same. And because they were the same as the other colours, they or we never noticed it until it was all too late. Now, there were several reasons why this movement was set up and forced onto a gullible public. Elites thought it would be a novel idea to collect taxes from women as well as men, pushing them into the job market. Remember, when it started, the job market was predominantly male. But they knew females would largely also accept lower wages, as back then a female working was classed by and large as a supplemental wage due to the husband in general being the main breadwinner, as it was called back then. So now they had two plans in place: collect taxes off females, who represented 51% of the population in a largely male-dominated work environment, and lower the wages to boot. But as I've said earlier, the cabal rarely do things with one or two purposes. It's more often 3 or 4 or more different purposes, all carefully strategized out and compartmentalized so people wouldn't get the hidden purposes and expose it. So what were the hidden agendas of the feminist movement that eventually revealed themselves down the years and led to Germaine Greer, the main face of the feminist movement, to state she deeply regretted ever putting her name and face to this movement? Put pure and simple, the family breakdown. That's what it was all about. The transgender programme is a full-on repeat of the feminist movement, except they, like the women 40 years ago, will only realise they've been played for fools in the exact same way further down the line. It's a programme. Mothers and fathers both working, and people thought at the time it would be great. With extra income, we can buy a new car, go on more vacations, give the kids more, have a better lifestyle for all the family. But it never turned out that way, did it? Despite two parents working, you now find you have less now than you did when just the man traditionally worked for all of the family. How can that be? How does that all work out? And why do we keep falling for their stupid programs? This is what we have to correct going forward by using critical thinking skills in mass numbers again. The reality is the system has never been in support of any group of people in history, never mind women, blacks, Hispanics, natives, or gay, lesbian, or transgender. They're not interested in anybody. They use the so-called minorities to drive their policies, not ours. Except the impact of the feminism movement has been, in my opinion, the most far-reaching and damaging ever. So women went to work, and in kicked two major problems. The comparative mindset, where women compare their husbands, lifestyles, sex life and various other comparisons, which leads to envy and demanding more from their partners, which largely they were more than happy with before mixing in the workplace, that is. and then the increase in females having extramarital affairs went on a massive up curve that has never subsided since. Divorce rates have soared since that movement come in, as women comparing lifestyles felt somehow that they were missing out on life. The reality is they weren't, as most women were lying under their mask of illusion, that somehow that they had more than everybody else. The reality was they didn't. Their mask covered up their illusionary lifestyles. But once in comparative mindset, what is fake and what is real becomes a murky fog, or more apt, a smoky mirror. As time went by and this hideous program escalated beyond all control, including for women, the effect on men became devastating. No longer the protector and the provider, which was the traditional role, but they became rendered as instantly replaceable by a pack-like mentality devoid of nurturing, care, love and compassion, and replaced far too often by women more interested in how much the man earns, and that then decides on whether they sleep or live with them. With falling male wages, a direct consequence of the female low wage, something had to give. What did give was males were rendered mute, weaker, subservient, nervous, terrified, and a loss of warrior status, which is exactly how they want it now, this day. Programs are always done ahead of time. They wanted men when the final battle of the dark and the light is underway in that condition. Throw in genetic engineering via the original chemtrails, which lowered men's testosterone and increased women's, and you have a recipe for disaster. What gave for women was they lost their own identity in their drive for girl power and became bullish, dismissive, insensitive, ever more demanding, and service to self. Remember, this is an overview and does not apply to all individuals. Take one look at Match.com or some other dating site. The point is, why are so many people single and are reduced to having to go onto a computer to meet people these days? Is lost on many. It's almost a glorified prostitution, is it not? Selling yourself to the highest bidder. What happened to meeting up at venues, bars and clubs and the traditional meeting up places? All face to face. What happened as girls went out in packs, and if any male approached, were treated to a pack mentality of abuse and ridicule, and all the girls go along with it to fit in, the herd mentality, all passing instant judgment without getting to really know the guy. But is it not the case there's always one or two in that pack who would have liked to chat to some of the guys who approached? But they all join in with abuse and ridicule as they feel they have to fit in. That is sad behaviour and damaging to all who participate. You can go and witness what I've just described in any bar. Do your own research. The reason why is men nowadays are in general terrified of women. as they see women as being more money oriented than love based. And they worry if you go out with a woman, they will take everything they have earned off them. This is the way men really think now. Is that the way it should be? Clearly not. But it has happened to too many to argue otherwise. Women know the courts protect them, and the kids is the reason why. And you want to know the real reason why the bulk of the money goes to the woman in a court settlement? Because the system knows women will spend it faster, is why. This is why 81% of all expenditures in shops is done by females. You see, it's all a marketing game. That's all it is. Total marketing ploy. So check out the profiles on Match and see for yourself the demands of females, where they dismiss roughly 90% plus of men with their profile requests alone. Must earn 100,000 plus per year. Must have been to college or university. No tattoos. No divorcees. No children at home. Non-drinking, non-smoking or non-drugs. Must be between this and that age. I want a sugar daddy. Really? And for the sad majority of them, these people are largely, are just not appealing to the eye to most men. These are mainly women who got left dancing on their own at the end of the prom or the nightclub. They just aren't that appealing. And yet they make so many demands and they wonder why they're still on their own. Newsflash for those people. Quit with your demands and conditions, because love is not based on how much someone earns. That is the definition of shallow. You ask for shallow, you get it. But then it becomes so shallow, it runs dry. For many of you, your thinking and morals have ran dry. So a man who buys a ring for $100 because he's living to his means and that's all he can afford is not as good as the fool who pays $3,000 and goes into debt. He's just a cheapskate, some will cry. No. You have lost your own sense of identity and what is real value. To 99% of people, a $100 ring looks no different to a $10,000 ring. It's a piece of metal and something that resembles a piece of glass. But it's called a diamond. And they all must have the biggest one to show off to their friends. But it's not showing off, is it? It's rubbing people's nose in it. And I'm sorry, but the overview sees more than the ones immersed in it. It always does. You're not showing the ring to impress people. You're showing them to rub people's noses in it because they haven't got it. It's the same when people buy new cars, new houses. the comparative mindset kicks in the envy. Women complain now, where is the chivalry of men? The answer is it was lost in a tidal wave of service to self, of what can I get out of him, and has left men terrified of committing, always on edge, as too easily they get dumped or replaced in a blink of an eye. The worst thing for men is they can't admit their real feelings to other men, as it's perceived as being weak. Actually, it's a strength. And yet this program has left many men broken externally, and more importantly, internally, operating like a shadow version of themselves. And you think that is bad enough, and yet I've left out the biggest impact of this program, and what really is the most important: the impact divorce has. Parents away in work all the time, loss of love and nurturing, the sight of overstretched parents' lifestyles leading to verbal and violent squabbles in the home, and people wonder why so many children appear to be almost feral-like. The loss of at least one parent always being there for them was stripped away by this program. It is to the children where the most damage has occurred. Ask why so many children are now riddled with drugs, alcohol addictions, getting into trouble with the law, why so many are psychologically unbalanced, why so many attend a psychologist, why so many flunk or fail school, why so many avoid their parents and hide in their room, why so many won't attend family parties, or if they have a birthday or other events, parents are not wanted there, and why so many are dependent on the state. It all goes back to that one movement in the late 60s, early 70s, and we all fell for it. I'm not for 1 minute saying men are perfect by any means. Some have done some awful things to women over the years. So many women in the past who wrongly tolerated the abuse of the husband or partner to save the children and the family. Saving the children and preserving the family was a key role for women of the past. But sadly, for too many now, it's about getting out what they want in life and stuff the man, and in ever increasing numbers, stuff the children as well. This is not the way we should be or act. So the big question remains to all women: is this really how you all wanted it to turn out? Do you really realise how much of the essence of being a woman has been stripped away? Do you really like that hollow feeling inside your heart that yearns for real love? Do you want real love? Or is love based on how much he earns? Do you really care as much for your children as your ancestors did? The truthful answers to those 5 questions determines our future path. I ask all to please ponder deeply on those 5 questions in your own time. It will stimulate a reaction in some, I do get that. It was in part written to stimulate reaction. As for too long, this problem has been ignored, and whilst it is ignored, it will always remain a problem. And to the females demanding $100,000 a year plus earnings on Match.com, you guys will stay single for the rest of your lives. So I'll repeat again, this was not an attack piece on females, because I'm more than aware of the poor behaviour of men in relationships. But this was a deliberate programme of divide and conquer, not only between male and female, but the family and the children's lives also. Recognising the problem is the first start to correcting it, so we can all learn to love and care in a better way in the future. And perhaps one day love will walk in all our doors. I hope you've enjoyed this show. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. We'll have more details whether I do Q&A tomorrow or Saturday. Bye for now.